Hey guys, if you're watching today's video, you have noticed the title, Everything I Want to Do is Illegal, is actually the title of a book by Joel Salatin, a fantastic book that I would highly recommend. And it directly relates to the subject in which I want to talk to you about today. And I want to raise awareness about government intervention in agriculture and how it is not only just detrimental, but it actually achieves the opposite of what it intends to do. And I plan on laying out exactly what I mean by this by bringing attention to an email that I received just yesterday. I came back from a fantastic weekend in Boston and Montreal, working with some urban farmers down there and hanging out with Jean-Martin Fortier, my good buddy, in Montreal for an afternoon. I come back in full spirits, fully charged, and I open my email and see this kind of shocking and very questionable email, and I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to break it down as to why it is not only hypocritical, but is also unethical, and it also achieves the opposite of what these programs intend to do. So I'm going to read the email. It is from the Intern Association. I'm going to leave out the name of the individual in the email because I don't want I don't want to get across any ill will towards them. I know they're probably just doing their job. So the email reads, "Hi Green City Acres staff. My name is blank, and I'm the Director of Outreach with the Canadian Intern Association. We protect interns and work to improve internship conditions in Canada. I'm writing to express concern about your unpaid internship at Green City Acres. You may not be aware, but virtually all unpaid internships are illegal in British Columbia. Interns who work are usually employees under the BC Labour and Employment laws, and they are entitled to the minimum protections set out in them. Those protections include the right to minimum wage, which is currently $10.85 an hour in BC. Interns cannot sign away their right to minimum wage or other protections. This means that even if an intern agrees to work for free, they are still legally entitled to be paid and can file a complaint with the BC Standards Branch. Employers who break the law can be legally compelled to pay back pay to interns/former interns." Now, this next paragraph is my favorite part of the email, and I'm going to break that one down as best I can once I finish reading it. "Beyond the legal consequences of unpaid internships, they are also unethical. They limit access to interesting and meaningful work, in your case, agriculture, to those who are rich enough to work for free. Studies show that women are overrepresented in unpaid internship industries. They promote inequality and undermine starting wages for young people who face heavy debt burdens." I guess they haven't checked out the universities lately and the debt that people are coming out of there from them. "With all this in mind, I would encourage you to immediately stop offering unpaid internships. If you require additional information, we provide an overview of intern rights on our website, www.internassociation.ca. I would also be happy to answer any questions that you might have." So, thank you, but I will not be answering your email or providing you any type of value to help your organization, for one. But first, let's break this down. I want to just jump ahead to the third paragraph, which I find just like mind-bogglingly hypocritical and is an absolute contradiction. This part here that reads, "Beyond the legal consequences of unpaid internships, they are also unethical." So this individual is taking it upon themselves to lecture me on ethics when they work for an institution of coercion, in the sense that governments cannot produce value without the use of coercion. A government cannot offer any value unless they go to the free market and extract from the unwilling through the threat of force, through taxation, to reallocate those resources. Whereas an individual like myself and many of you guys who work in the free market, we find mutually beneficial agreements to create value. So I have something you want, you have something I want, we both meet and then create more value as a result. So governments can actually only extract value and reallocate value. They can't actually create value. So it's funny that this person's lecturing me about ethics because clearly they don't know anything about ethics. So that was my favorite part. And then just going forward in that paragraph, "They limit access to interesting and meaningful work, in your case, agriculture, to those who are rich enough to work for free." So there's this class implication there that only the rich or people with lots of money can afford unpaid internships. And again, there's this sort of like disconnection with reality with this person or this organization that, have you checked out universities lately? Have you gone to see how much it costs to go and to get a degree in uselessness at a university? I'm a farmer here, and there's many farmers around that are offering free education and work experience to learn the things that are actually valuable. You know, when you go to a university degree, 80% of it is schlock that you're never going to use, and maybe 20% of it is actually applicable to your direct field. And then you pay $20,000, $100,000, whatever for that. Whereas you can go to a farm and learn exactly the things you need to know to run that farm and almost get 100% from your exchange of value. So the irony is they're talking about class and it being rich, but then they're forcing people to go through traditional institutions like universities and pay that tuition. So that's kind of ironic there, isn't it? And so I don't know where this whole part with that women are overrepresented in unpaid internships, that might be true. And here's the thing with this is I'm not doubting that there are people out there taking advantage of interns and abusing the whole idea of it. There's no doubt they are. There's people doing all kinds of bad stuff. The problem is when you create a one-size-fits-all policy because one person screwed something up at one point, and so now the book of regulations get exponentially longer, and now everybody is forced to go through this work through this regulation. And so what laws like this, how they function is sort of like a monoculture. It's just like it's a monoculture of society or the mind where one size fits all. So even though this doesn't really apply to me because I'm not making an internship to abuse interns and get free labor, I'm doing this out of my own goodwill because I had literally hundreds of emails requesting it to offer a free internship, and so that's what I have tried to do. And so now we can't do this. And so on their website, if you go to internassociation.ca, they stipulate two things that exempt you from this regulation. One is that you are a state-regulated internship association or something to that manner, meaning that you might be like a steel factory or something, and you apply for this internship thing from the government, you do all this stupid paperwork, and then you have to jump through all their hoops and meet all their requirements, meaning you probably have to do certain standard operating procedures that they approve, right? And then they'll give you some money to subsidize the income or the wage of that intern. So that sounds like a nice program, but there's also a lot of things in there that are also detrimental to internships, in my opinion. But the other thing they do is they say if you provide education, conventional education, meaning that if somebody shows up to pay for a program, then they're not an intern. So, you know, the workaround here is that I no longer offer internships, but I offer extended paid workshops. So you have to come and pay, and then you can take a workshop with me. So for people like me, this thing won't really have any effect because I have a global audience, and I can get people from whoever that want to come and work with me and learn from me. And I'm happy to do so. But who this will really affect is the small grower and aging farmer who, you know, their kids don't want to take over the farm because they've seen the debt and the grind that farming is, so they're discouraged out. And a lot of these farmers have good skills to share, and even though they might be conventional, they have knowledge to share. One of the most important aspects of farming is as far as your learning experience goes, is actually how to work, how to go out in the rain, how to get up early in the morning, how to just like task manage and just get things done. And you can't learn that stuff in university. Only farmers, you can really only learn that on a farm. And so this is just going to hurt those people. It's just going to, and it's not even the older folks. It's the younger folks this is going to hurt because they're just now creating more barriers to entry, and they're essentially forcing people to use the traditional academic institutions, being state-approved trades programs or universities or community colleges or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with those institutions at all. I teach at universities and colleges all the time. But it just means that those that can't meet these requirements will effectively be forced into them. So, you know, one example is prohibition, and this is essentially a form of prohibition. So you create a prohibition law that says you cannot smoke marijuana. So does that actually prevent people from smoking marijuana? No, it just turns people who smoke marijuana into criminals. So that's what's going to happen here. Two things are going to come as a result of this. One is people will just change and follow the path of least resistance, which is what human beings do and what I will do. I'll just create an education program and charge for it. Or they'll just end up hosting internships and potentially be held legally liable, meaning they'll be fined, and if they don't pay the fines, they'll be in jail. So good job, guys. You've turned farmers who just want to educate people into criminals. So this is essentially what they're doing. This whole thing with they promote inequality and undermine starting wages for young people who face heavy debt burdens. So again, going back to the education thing is that you now have to just pay to go to education. So they achieve the opposite of what they intend. It seems like their language is that they want to defend people who are in lower classes and have less money, but they're achieving the opposite because they're forcing people that would offer education for free out of the marketplace and then forcing them to go into the traditional marketplace of expensive education. And so now they're just creating less opportunities. So they've not only made education more expensive, but they've also reduced the amount of overall education in total. So I want to outline the part in this email that sounds, in my opinion, quite nefarious. And I don't say that lightly, and I don't mean that it's nefarious on the part of the individual that is writing the email or even the organization itself, but it's nefarious in the sense that they're forcing people out of other forms of capital into financial capital because that form of capital can be controlled. So let me explain this. As they talk about, they say here that they are entitled to minimum protections set out in them. Those protections include the right to minimum wage, which is 1085 in BC. And then they say that interns cannot sign away their right to a minimum wage. So even though you say that I would agree, we're both consenting adults, and I agree to work for you in exchange for knowledge, which is freer, is cheaper than university. Now you're forced to pay me, and now if I pay you, now I'm also forced to tax you and extract that tax on behalf of the state. And I am morally opposed to doing that, though I do what I have to do so that I don't go to prison. So I do pay taxes, but now I'm forced to pay you and tax you accordingly. But the thing that's really nefarious about this is what this is doing is diluting the experience of individuals to dollars and cents. So those of us who operate in the real world and so that don't operate in the state, we use other forms of capital every single day, even though we don't know that we're doing so. So an example of this is the 8 forms of capital. So I would encourage any of you to research, just Google 8 forms of capital and check that out, and I'll talk about some of them here. So there's many forms of capital. So capital is the result of work that can be freely traded and stored. It's a store of value in some way or another. So the most common form of capital that we know is financial capital, dollars and cents. The other that's really common form of capital is social capital. I talk about this a lot in my podcasts and my videos, or I refer to as social equity, in that the relationships I build with people actually have a capital return because those relationships turn into other things. And so by doing good things for others, they in part do good things for me. Knowledge capital is another really important one. The information and things that you learn are a form of capital, and in the sense of an internship, that's kind of what it is we're exchanging the capital resource of work in exchange for knowledge capital. So we're operating without financial capital, but we are exchanging a form of capital that has mutual benefit. For us farmers as well, resource capital, we build resources and store resources to be used later on. So that could be anything. It could be storing seeds, that could be storing lumber, it could be storing anything. But what we also do as farmers is we create biological capital. We grow plants and build those plants up. We increase biodiversity, we increase ecology, we do good things for the planet and the community. So these are all other forms of capital that can be used and exchanged freely. But what is really nefarious about this is what they're essentially trying to do is force people out of the other forms of capital and force them into financial capital, because The government prints the money. They control the flow of the money, how the money can be spent. They regulate it. They create occupational licensing, and they tax it. So when the government forces us to only use means of financial capital, then they essentially control our lives. And this is an example of why we don't live in a free society. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because it's too long. But this is really the root of the issue here, is that the government is continuously getting in between us as individuals to act as a middleman to determine what is right and what is wrong, but they do it all through the use of force and coercion, whereas individuals like you and I try to find mutually beneficial agreements and win-win situations through voluntary transactions, which everything the state does is involuntary. It's involuntary extraction of capital wealth from individuals to allocate as they see fit. So this whole thing is not only going to discourage more farmers from imparting their knowledge on new farmers, so old farmers imparting their knowledge on new farmers, but it's also going to disincentivize it altogether. It's going to make people criminals for simply wanting to share their knowledge. And at the end of it, they might have prevented the odd farmer here and there from abusing interns, which I get, but social ostracism does the same thing. This is the problem with a lot of these laws, is that here's one example. To have a law to say do not kill. I mean, of course, we all agree we should not kill. But is it the law that stops you from killing somebody, or is it the fear of repercussions for the consequences of your actions that stop you from doing it? And I would argue that the fear of consequence and repercussions is what stops most of us from acting immorally, and it's the fear of social ostracism, which is the greatest form of governance that we have, because it's non-coercive. It's something that we don't want to do this because we don't want to ostracize ourselves from society, and that's a good thing, is to be a moral compass. And that's how we all get along, because do laws prevent people from killing one another? Do laws that prevent people from owning guns stop people from owning guns? No, they actually just encourage the people who are willing to take the risk to own guns to own them, meaning organized crime and government. So anybody in between is essentially a pawn to be pushed around by those that will. So big subjects here, but I wanted to touch on it because I think it is important, and I want people to understand how these kinds of programs do not help. They only harm individuals and farmers, and I know that the people within these institutions have the best of intentions, but their actions will only achieve the opposite of what they intend to do. So hope you guys have found that helpful. If you want to see more stuff like this, please hit the subscribe button and like and share this video if you found it valuable, and get the message out there. All right, guys, talk to you later.